Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. A few weeks ago, I finally watched The Lion King for the first time, and I thought, why not make a video about it? So, pretty much everybody has talked about this movie because, it's probably the most iconic animated film of all time. It's gigantic hit that has a terrible that Disney was big enough for Disney to make one of their terrible live action remakes. And that was so big, now they're making a terrible live prequel to that terrible live action remake. Enough about that. Nobody cares about that. I thought I'd give a perspective of someone who has only seen this movie once and only for the first time recently. So, what you're gonna hear is probably stuff you've heard before because there really isn't. I don't think there really is anything else to say about this movie that hasn't already been said 1,000 times, but I wanted to talk about it. So without further ado, let's do it to it. So I want to talk about the visuals first. I haven't seen a ton of Disney movies, but I've seen a decent amount of them, and this is their most visually impressive movie. And funnily enough, this was actually Disney's B project. Pocahontas was their A project, and that has terrible writing, ter- mediocre to just awful animation and art direction, and boring, dumb songs. Yeah, that really shows you how little Disney knows about what is good and what is not. But yeah, the visuals in this movie are just super impressive. The way everything, I don't really know any much about how animation works specifically, but I can say this just looks amazing. The colors here, when we see the zebras in the opening, with all the water splashed around, the lighting, it's beautiful. Or the shots of the elephant graveyard, all the detail put into all the bones around everywhere, it's really impressive. And I just want to like this shot of through the montage of Simba growing up with Timon and Pumbaa, which this image was copied in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, but with Puss, Shrek, and Donkey when Puss's lies are flashing before his eyes. I like that. I really like this drawing of the moon. I don't really have anything else to say. The visuals are really impressive. And of course, if we're talking impressive visuals, have to mention the amazing scene where Simba sees Mufasa's spirit in the sky. That's just stunning. This is what we call cinema. And also, since I don't have a section for it, I was going to talk about the not the song specifically. I'll get into that, but just the background music by Hans Zimmer. It's really good. It's definitely not his best work, but it's really good. And nothing about it is no part of it is particularly memorable. It's not he did much better work on the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels and with John Powell on the first two Kung Fu Pandas, but this is still very good music. I like it. Fits the tone well. But now I talk about the actual songs because it's a Disney Renaissance movie, so it's a musical. Well, I mean Tarzan and I guess The Rescuers Down Under are not musicals, but most of them are. So the songs here are definitely not my favorites, but they're still very good. I like them. I'm just going to talk about the main one, so I'm not going to talk about The Morning Report, which is just too short. And yeah, I did see the special edition. You should see that version instead, if you can find, if you have it. And I guess Simba's song "When I'm King" is fine. I don't really have anything to say about it, but Hakuna Matata is the first big song I want to talk about. I like this song. It's a catchy musical number with all the bright visuals and stuff like that, and all the movements. I really like this one. Can You Feel the Love Tonight is good. I mean, I just have to talk about how no, I can't feel the love tonight because this romance plot is incredibly underdeveloped and practically non-existent. I just do not care in the slightest. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who said that. Yeah, Aladdin had a much better romance plot. So did Tangled years later. And DreamWorks has done plenty of good ones, but I don't really care about that. It's such a minor aspect of the movie. The actual song itself, I love the visuals, and the song, it's good, but it's not very good, and it's sure not great. I don't know. I just don't really like Elton John. I didn't really like his songs in The Road to El Dorado. He sounds like a woman for some reason, which is really weird when he sings. I don't know why. But then there's The Circle of Life. It's kind of hard to really hear the lyrics. It's mostly just the tune, but it's a very good tune. This is definitely sets up the film really well. There's a reason that the opening is as iconic as it is. It's great. And yeah, I like the Circle of Life a lot. And of course, that's what a major theme of the film is, but let's get into that. And then, of course, there's Scar's villain song, Be Prepared, which is probably the best villain song ever. I mean, well, when it comes to Disney anyway. I like it a little more than Hellfire from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a little more than the Prince Ali reprise from Aladdin. It's not as good as the very first villain song ever written, which is the one from Popeye Meets Sinbad the Sailor back in 1933, but this is a very good villain song. Really sets up Scar well, which, speaking of Scar, let's talk about him. Best Disney villain. Yeah, well, no, Frollo is a little better, but he just really has a presence. He's even a little better than Jafar from Aladdin, or King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph. Great villain. It really goes to show you how far Disney has come with their villains, or rather, how many steps back they've taken. The first character we see after the opening of this movie, the first character we see speak is Scar. And eventually they went to having twist villains and then just no villain at all. And their last movie had one, but probably only because it was Disney's 100th anniversary movie, and he was a terrible villain. But Scar is nothing like that. Scar is just a great villain. I like how when you open, you just immediately you learn everything you need to know about him just from this first shot you see of him, as he's just grabbing this mouse and hanging it by the tail and talking about how insignificant it is to him or whatever, and he's about to eat it. And you could just hear his menacing voice, just looking at his body language. It's really good stuff. And of course, there's the whole famous scene where he kills Mufasa, which, yeah, it's a perfect scene. It's done so well. There's a reason it's probably the most iconic scene in the entire movie outside of the opening, maybe. And the whole way the lines are delivered too by Jeremy Irons, spot on performance. In fact, Pitch Black from Rise of the Guardians kind of sounds like Scar. Who knows? Maybe that was intentional. And this, again, I mentioned before his body language. That goes to show how good the animators were back then. Everything just has so much personality in it. It looks alive. And you can see all the characters' expressions because that's something else very important about this movie. All of the character designs are very basic. I mean, just look at Mufasa. He's just a lion. But because the facial expressions are so great and the voice acting is so great, shout out to James Earl Jones. He can play Darth Vader and this guy. You can tell them apart. I mean, Scar, he has that scar and he just looks different from all the other lions, so you can tell. But really great expressions like the previous one over here. And the whole scene just sets him up as a menace. This guy is so evil. He gleefully throws his brother into a horde of wildebeests that trample him to death, I guess. Ugh. And then he manipulates Simba into thinking that it was his fault, which also I didn't register this until the ending, but in the ending we're supposed to see that Simba knew Mufasa died and fell off that cliff. He just didn't see Scar kill him, which I thought he did. But then I guess we see that he didn't, so no until later, but whatever. But then there's this one line from Scar toward the end that just pretty much sells everything you need to know about him perfectly, much like an opening, which is when Simba's mother's telling him how terrible everything is and how he can't keep denying how he's ruined everything and he needs to help, he just says, "I'm king, I can do whatever I want." He's king, he doesn't care about anything else, all he cares about is that he has power, even though he really has... Who does he even have power over? What lands does he even rule anymore? Most of the people have left, and anyone that hasn't left is starving. It's miserable, but he doesn't care. He's king. And then, of course, there's the epic final battle he has with Simba, where he's finally cornered, beaten down, pinned to the floor, and he finally says it in front of everyone, "I did it, so they can hear you. I killed Mufasa." And this completely shocks everyone, which, look, I guess I can understand how I am a person watching a movie. I can see how just looking at him that, yeah, Scar is evil, but I guess in universe, nobody really likes Scar that much, but nobody would see him as this evil. And then his death scene is gleefully horrible. He gets eaten alive by the hyenas off screen. Yeah, he totally deserved this. This would have been better. Disney really used to kill off their villains well. I guess Jafar wasn't killed, but I mean, you could like Frollo's death, which I gotta talk about that movie sometime. But this is a great death scene. There are better villain deaths, like I don't know. Let me think of something from DreamWorks or Pixar. Yeah, I don't think anything will top Randall being beaten with a shovel from Monsters Inc. But this is just great death scene. He really deserved this. It's also just fitting to see that the hyenas are the ones to kill him at the end, and he was commanding them like an army before. Now I have to talk about the actual main character, Simba, and of course Mufasa. Simba is not the most interesting character. I've seen that as a big complaint before, which is that Simba doesn't really have a personality. Almost everything he does is informed by the plot, but you know what? I don't really care. This movie is so well paced and tightly written. I don't really have much of a complaint with that. I think he has just enough personality so that I care about him. And what also helps is that in all the scenes with Mufasa when he was a kid, you actually buy that yeah, he really cares about his father, and his father really cares about him. His father Mufasa may get mad at Simba multiple times for uh, misbehaving, yeah, but he still cares about him. He's his son. But then, of course, once Mufasa dies, you do really feel the impact because you saw the connection these two had. So when you really feel bad that Simba's father just died, and and then Scar convinces Simba that it's his fault, and this sticks with it because again, he doesn't know that Scar killed Mufasa until years later. So this has probably just been in the back of his head for most of his life, really. Also, great as this is, I think part of it's because I already knew it was coming, but no death scene can quite top in an animated movie like this can quite top Stoic's death from How to Train Your Dragon 2. That was just something else, especially with John Powell's score, but I already talked about that before. Then there's when Simba encounters Timon and Pumbaa and grows up with them. I like Timon and Pumbaa a lot. They're really funny. I like comedy duos, and I think all of their jokes just work really well. Yes, I know Pumbaa is kind of a bunch of fart jokes, but the reason these work is because one, you never hear farts, and they never actually say it. Because of the way it's done, it feels more clever than it otherwise would have been. And that's not what most of the jokes are. Most of the jokes are just informed by Timon and Pumbaa's personalities, and they're funny. I like them. Especially like that scene where the three of them are just looking at the stars together, and Timon says, I think the stars, those things up in the sky, are a bunch of fireflies that got stuck up there. And Pumbaa says, I think they're a bunch of evaporated balls of gas, which is exactly what they are. And then Timon says, Pumbaa, you see, everything with you is about gas. Yeah, I thought that was funny. And of course, they sing Hakuna Matata here. And I like how Simba's character growth he gets here. Not necessarily growth, but it's more like he gets stuck living like this for so long. He just becomes like one of them. He doesn't, and when Nala comes to find him and says that he needs to come back, he's just doesn't want to leave. He just wants to stay in his life with Timon and Pumbaa eating grubs. Then of course, after so long, the old baboon guy from the beginning, who we learn's name is Rafiki, finds out that I guess he just has a spiritual realization that Simba is alive and goes to find him, which I like Rafiki. He doesn't have much of a personality, but I always like the trope of the old wise man, and him being eccentric definitely adds a little bit of personality to him. And I really like this whole section of the movie. Again, Simba doesn't want to leave, even after Nala tried to convince him, and even after they had that whole Elton John song. Simba still doesn't want to leave until Rafiki finds him and tells him how he knows his father, not that he knew his father. But Simba does want to learn more about this, but as he says, he just can't go back. And then Rafiki hits him on the head and he says, "Ow, that hurt!" And Rafiki says, but it was in the past. He says, "It doesn't mean it didn't hurt." Ah, yes, the past can hurt, but you can either run from it or learn from it. And since he says he knows his father, he takes Simba to see the astral projection of Mufasa in the sky. As after all, Mufasa told Simba earlier in the movie that when he is king, the spirits of the previous kings will be able to look down upon him from the sky and give him help. And that's exactly what happens. And yeah, this scene is great. I think we all know that. The "you must remember who you are." Yeah, this is now's a good time to mention that this movie apparently took a lot of inspiration from the story of Moses, and you can definitely tell. I mean, when I was watching this, I was thinking, this is kind of like the Prince of Egypt. I mean, Jeffrey Katzenberg was involved in this. Hans Zimmer did the soundtrack, and it just feels like that. It's this, it's this epic animated film with big drama and big musical numbers, and this very much invokes the real life event or of Moses at the burning bush, except it's he sees that, well, there he was literally talked to by God himself, but here he sees the projection of his father, the previous king, and much like Moses, he doesn't want to do all this. He's thinking, how will they listen to me? I don't want to take on this burden of responsibility, but he's told this is his destiny. He must take on this responsibility. Only he can do this. And that's what he needs to gain his confidence and go back to Pride Rock and take down Scar once and for all. Fantastic scene. So yeah, again, James Earl Jones does a really good job. This whole time I was wondering, who is this? What is this voice? It's really familiar. Oh, and okay, actually I'll get to that later. So anyway, yeah, Simba returns to Pride Rock and defeats Scar and has him confess that he was the one who killed Mufasa. Well, actually, that doesn't quite happen yet because, again, remember, Simba didn't know that yet. He blamed himself all these years for Mufasa's death. So Scar has in front of the whole lions, he tells Simba, tell them who was really responsible for Mufasa's death. And Simba has grown enough that he can just say in front of them, it was me. And of course, everyone's shocked, and this isn't really true, and eventually the truth comes out, and then, they have the big final duel, yada yada yada, Scar dies. And then we get to the ending, which mirrors the first shot of the original, where Simba, all the animals gather to the cliff as the Circle of Life is once again playing, and the Circle of Life itself is once again moving along as we see Rafiki hold up Simba and Nala's child. And that's how it ends. So, conclusion, The Lion King is a great movie. Wow, who would have saw that coming? Yeah, when I saw this a few weeks ago, I was thinking that was just barely great, just barely a masterpiece. If not for the absolutely spectacular conclusion, which is just so good, I would not have called this great. I would just called it very good. But as I think about it more, yeah, this is definitely a masterpiece. It's still not my favorite Disney movie, definitely not my favorite animated movie, but how could you not love The Lion King? And when I'd seen the trailer for the Lion King Mufasa twice in theaters this year, and I thought, that looks really terrible. And the more I saw it, the more I wanted to watch The Lion King, the original, so I did. And now actually having watched it just makes me hate that even more. It says that Mufasa, and that movie's about how Mufasa was the first king, but that's a prequel to the live action remake, which, terrible execution and boring filler aside, is still the exact same story, same scenes as the original. And the original says that Mufasa was not the first king. These kings have existed for generations, which makes sense. So if Mufasa is the first king, this doesn't make any sense and kind of undermines a bunch of what happens here. But that's why I really hope that movie bombs, and it probably will. Let's be honest. I may think it's gonna be awful, but go on December 20th, go see Sonic 3 instead of Lion King Mufasa. But yeah, Lion King is a great movie, definitely worthy of its classic status. I can understand how this was, when it came out, I think in the top 5 biggest hits in history. Definitely worthy of it. It's a great movie that I really like. And if you should see yeah, just go watch it again. It's really good. Comment down below what you thought of this. I was very glad to finally make this video. So that's all for now. And as always, keep on juicing.